Have you ever thought about committing arson just out of pure boredom? Did Ross Chastain have better judgment than Jack Doohan? Welcome to Tinfoil Helmets, your occasional spicy hot take roundup with all the latest F1 rumors, with the almost believable conspiracy theories to back them up. Everything here has been carefully researched for hours to make sure it is totally founded in logic, reason, and truth. Or not. Who knows? And I am surprised that the F1 official cut race highlight YouTube video for this race was 8 minutes long.
Sky's highlights apparently were 1 hour. And I don't understand how that is technically possible.
Yeah.
Nothing happened.
Because before we hit the record button, we were very tempted to do well, here's the intro. So I think Lando was totally in the wrong about if Max pushed him into the grass. So thank you for listening to Tinfoil Helmets.
But since we have many listeners and advertisers, for the many adverts we have to run, we have to go through this, and we're going to take a full 2.5 hours to discuss this.
Yes.
Shall we see whether we got anything right?
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay. You thought in your esteemed wisdom that Oscar would continue to outshine Lando. He did!
Yeah. I don't know how I'm quite getting the point for this, but I'm not going to be upset about getting the point for this.
Okay. But nonetheless, Oscar did perform better than Lando, although maybe not on track because of team orders.
But it did seem like Oscar... I still think Oscar's biggest weakness is his qualifying, and if he clears that up, Lando is clearly the second driver.
Washed.
Yeah.
You predicted that Fernando would DNF via a safety car. No, sadly, there was no safety car and nobody DNF'd. It was the 16th race in F1 history where everybody finished it. So, shocker.
And nobody got DQ'd either.
Yep. You made a very spicy take that halfway through saying this, you'll think that he gets the point, but then he snatches victory from the jaws of defeat. Max on the podium, but not first.
I stand by that prediction. I still think that was a good prediction.
That is what the universe said should happen, but then McLaren decided not to do it correctly.
And we forgot that it is indeed Max Verstappen.
Yeah, which is becoming a bit of a meme. My predictions, which were long and litmus in the specificity of only one. Lawson will remain in the Red Bull for Japan. He will then do poorly and then is fired after a truly humiliating race. No, he got fired the day after.
I mean, you got 1 out of 3 right.
That he did poorly and was humiliated?
He did poorly, like...
Yeah, it wasn't good. So our predictions continue to be not great this season.
But I think overall our predictions are great this season.
They are good predictions, but they are inaccurate predictions.
Well, that's okay. And for the inside baseball of recording this podcast, we are recording on Monday, just around noon Pacific time. And if you haven't noticed, there is some stock market turmoil going on. But Jim Cramer said that today was going to be worse than it was going to be another Black Monday, like from 1987. And the market's only down about 0.5%. So good job, Jim Cramer, continuing to use your powers for good.
So what you're saying is that we are worthy of a primetime TV show because our predictions are just as accurate.
Oh, well, are you familiar with the reverse Cramer ETF?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, okay. So for those unaware, Jim Cramer's advice is famously bad in such a way that somebody made a hedge fund bot thing that took the opposite position of what he said and made money. So, yeah. So Jim Cramer's just one of those, like, if he says a bad thing's going to happen, most likely something good is going to happen. So saying the market's going to, go down 10% and then it goes down like 0.5 to 1, great job, Jim. Way to use your powers for good.
So the lesson here is you should take out a Tinfoil Helmets ETF by betting on Formula One using your favorite predictions market.
And with that, we'd like to introduce our first sponsor, DraftKings. Use our parlays
now. So did anything happen between the races?
Well, we have something here of Yuki got his wings, so I guess a bell must have been rung.
Yes, and he has now been moved up. He's been elevated into exactly the same coloured car for this weekend. Is driving the full fat Red Bull, and I thought that was great because I think he kind of deserves it. And without previewing the race, I think he did pretty good too. But you should also Note that as part of this, Max Verstappen has more points for Red Bull in his entire career than Liam had hours in the Red Bull team. And we're not talking racing hours. We're talking actual wall clock hours.
I saw the stat on social media. I don't know when they're counting it from, but it was something like 2,100 hours versus like 2,000, or like 2019 hours versus like 2,100 points. So I don't know exactly. I mean, I guess we could do the count back to figure out when they're saying. I don't know if it's like start of testing, start of Australia, start of the year. But I did find it very funny that, yes, Liam has. It was from some way of counting, Liam had more points, or Max had more points in the Red Bull than Liam had hours in the Red Bull. There was also a clip that resurfaced recently of Daniel Ricciardo mentioning that the only people who have had success at Red Bull are people with double letters in their name.
Oh, interesting. Daniel...
Which Sergio Perez kind of broke that, but then he also kind of didn't have success.
Yeah.
So if you're going with that, Yuki will also not be the way to go. Yeah. But I think Isaac has a double A.
I correctly spelt this earlier in our notes. Let me check.
No, it's not. It's a single.
Oh. Yeah, there we go.
Isaac, change the spelling of your name.
Yep. This probably happened really because it was a Japan race and Japan would like to pay some money, because the rumor behind the scenes is that Yuki was offered the seat. Well, more accurately, they said they could give him the seat way back in 2024, but maybe Honda would like to pay $10 million, and Honda were like, we're not paying $10 million. And apparently then Red Bull came back and asked last week, would they like to pay the $10 million now? I don't know what they said to that one. Hopefully it was get bent.
Oh, I saw it was something different, of like Honda had originally offered to pay $20 million to get Yuki in the seat for this season. Oh, and they decided to go with Liam. And then when Liam wasn't working out, they went back to Honda and said, hey, would you still be interested in this? And Honda said, yeah, but he's got to be in by Japan because, they want him for their home race.
Right. So in either way, maybe there was some money that changed hands here, and it's all not Liam's fault. But moving on from that, because we will discuss his performance in the very extensive details about the race.
I would say it is still somewhat Liam's fault, because if he was matching Max Verstappen's pace, it wouldn't be having a conversation.
Oh, he doesn't need to match Max Verstappen's pace. He just had to not to be last.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Apparently people want to bring back V10s and nobody wants anything to do with it, and I have no idea where this is coming from, but it's a persistent rumor, and supposedly all the engine manufacturers have gone, no.
I feel like this has been a rumor since like 2014 when the new engines were first on track.
Yeah, but this week the FAA actually had a meeting about it. And apparently they're going to have another meeting this week to be like, no, please, really.
I think we talked about this in like our last podcast, where it's like, I think there's some indication of how do you get different manufacturers and engine manufacturers to be interested in Formula One. Something that's not listed, well, I guess it's somewhat listed on our Between Race Drama, is Valtteri was talking about kind of how he ended up back at Mercedes in a reserve role. And it was pretty much like, well, he was brought into Sauber as part of like the Audi project and like to help lead the team. And then it looks like Audi's just taken like step back after step back after step back, to the point where it's like there was nothing for him to do. And then like Williams was an option, but then like Williams decided to sign Carlos Sainz, and Valtteri was waiting on like a Sauber commitment sort of thing. So he just ended up kind of in a musical chairs that didn't go a good way. And sense of, Audi's almost worse than Honda in their F1 commitment, because at least Honda does join the sport and then say they'll quit.
Exactly. But it is true that Valtteri does appear to be leading somewhat his best life.
He was doing some Insta 360 camera stuff on a roller coaster.
He's been on his bike around the track. He does a little, breakdown every week, and he's got the media duties, because would you really want to put George in front of the media to talk about something? No, you want to put Valtteri. He knows how to do it properly. And Kimi's too young.
Well, we also learned that Kimi is finishing up his like high school equivalency, whatever, exams in between races.
Good for him, doing two jobs at the same time. That's what you got to do to be able to afford the F1 seat. You got to do two jobs, drive it, and get educated.
It's good to know that like there's not even a high school degree requirement for a Formula One job.
That's good to know. That's an important fact.
Good news for all you high school dropouts out there. You're only several $1 million away and a shitload of talent away from being a Formula One driver.
Yes, get started now. Preferably before you've dropped out of high school, because you need to start when you're about 5. Plan ahead. Speaking of people who kind of started early and dropped out, apparently Max has a exit clause in his Red Bull contract that if they are not in the top 3 by the summer break, he can bounce.
That could get interesting depending on if Ferrari decides they want to race cars again.
No, Ferrari don't want to race cars. But on the other hand, Zach Brown might want to collect another driver. So, speaking of drivers, apparently Horner really wanted Franco Colapinto in the car. And Marco insisted that he can't, and you have to use someone from the driver academy, which feels very confusing and very strange.
Well, it's also very interesting. It's not that interesting. It's like, what's the point of having it? This is not something that's even just a Red Bull problem. It's like, what's the point of having a driver academy if you're not going to promote anybody through the driver academy? Mm-hmm. But, I don't want to say 5 years ago, because it was really like 2018, 2019, where you had the Red Bull Young Driver Program was so full of talent and really nowhere for that talent to go. We know when Daniel Ricciardo was like still in the seat and things like that, and everything was looking good. So, it's very interesting to see like essentially how the Red Bull Driver Academy has pulled back, because like Vettel did come through there, Ricciardo did come through there, Carlos Sainz came through there, Alex Albon came through there, didn't he? Yeah, he was a Red Bull driver for briefly.
Yep.
Pierre Gasly, like I think it was one of the seasons recently where like a quarter of the grid had been a Red Bull junior driver at some point in time. We can give Brendan Hartley but he came through there as well. And, the Torpedo. Yeah. Daniel Kvyat.
I think even right now you've got 20 drivers, and you've got Max, and you've got Yuki, and you've got Isaac.
Well, it is easy when 4 of them are in the car. Four of them are in 4 cars.
Yeah.
And Carlos.
And you've got Carlos and Alex.
And Pierre.
Yeah. So now we're over a quarter of the grid.
Yeah. Over a third of the grid, really.
Yeah. Over a third of the grid. So they need to do something about it. Maybe they should buy Sauber off Audi. Shall we move on to our next segment about people and jobs and the questioning of their abilities?
I just have to say, I feel like there was always F1 news going on in the last, 2 weeks, but really there wasn't that much drama. I think there was just, a bunch of pop and circumstance around the changing of the seat at Red Bull so early and then everything else. But I was like, because when we were putting this together, I remember oh, man, we must have sent each other a bunch of stuff about this. And as I'm scrolling back, it's like, oh, we kind of didn't. There's something else here, but no, okay, fine. Yeah, it's whatever. All right.
Well, World's been distracted by other issues. Let's not turn this into a podcast of doom and gloom. Let's talk about the excitement about whether people still have jobs, such as Jack. It worked in the sim Doohan. I'm going to come out and say it. I think Ross Chastain did this better. Ross Chastain was the NASCAR driver who's like, I'm going to slam it into the wall and ride it around the corner to gain some places. He succeeded. Doohan instead went off in 180 miles an hour into a wall.
But if we're going to talk about Ross Chastain, I think we have to get the quote right of, I'm not lifting until I see God or the checkered flag.
There we go. That's commitment.
That's a great quote.
It is. It's beautiful. But Jack didn't do that. Jack apparently just forgot to close his DRS.
I thought there was something about brake pressure that would close it, but I guess he didn't put enough brake pressure in.
Yeah. So the story is that every other driver presses the button on the steering wheel to close the DRS. And Jack Doohan didn't. And all he does is he brakes. And when the DRS shuts past a certain brake pressure, and it appears that what has happened is he learned to do it that way because it worked in the sim. Not that he was trying to dive bomb into turn 1 in Suzuka without closing the DRS like he's some kind of god. But it was the fact that he'd only been letting the DRS braking do it, and he went a little bit too light, and it didn't close. And every other driver had learned to press the close button at the appropriate point instead.
Yeah, I guess because for turn one, the first part of turn 1 at Suzuka, or the first bit of the turn at Suzuka, doesn't require as much braking as then you get into the later halves of the turn. So yeah, I could see what he was trying to do with the DRS if that was a thing, but I guess it's not a thing.
Yep. So Jack Doohan clearly completely destroyed the car. The only thing they saved was the power unit. Everything else was completely replaced. So He hopefully will win the World Destructors Championship this year.
There was that he has to stay in the seat long enough to get it, which this is not a good.
True.
I mean, I guess there's some other things going on here with Jack as well that I think deserve to be mentioned, because they said the force was like 50 G's, which was almost the same as like Max at Silverstone, and he said he suffered with kind of the consequences of that crash for a couple of years. I believe he was cleared medically by a third-party doctor to race, but like there was video of him struggling to get out of the car after the race, and all we can do is speculate on if those are related or not. But it does seem a little bit like, was he forcing himself to drive? Because if he sits out and Colapinto goes in, then he never gets back in the seat. And
that is a good point. That is a very good point. I hadn't actually thought about the fact that if he sat out, it would be Colapinto. Actually, would it be Colapinto this weekend? Because they had another guy in the seat this weekend as the other reserve driver. Rio,
So, well, still at that point in time, if you're, Australia was a 1 lap and done, or half lap and done. Wherever we just were, China was fine, and then you sit out Japan. That doesn't look good if we're talking about being replaced after 5 races. And if Flavio wasn't the team principal, maybe I'm not speculating on the inner workings of what's going on here, but all this seems like some really kind of shady shit dealing with people's health, and that's not good.
Yeah. I also suspect that if he'd sat out, he would have probably been sat out for the next 3 races, even if he was going to stay into it, because they'd be like, oh, you were out? Oh, well, you probably shouldn't come back in the weekend after either. You probably should sit out for the next 2 races.
Yeah.
So. Next person on the list, Stroll has strolled back into the watch list after 2 good races where we saw him outperforming Fernando Alonso. And now you should read this stat because it's such a lovely stat.
He was the only lapped driver in a 100% green flag race.
Yes. Apparently his tires wouldn't work, and so he kept changing them in a desperate hope that he wouldn't cook them.
Yeah, because normally, like, the undercut is somewhat powerful, and if somebody stops early, like, they might not close the whole pit stop gap to the back of the field, but they're in clear air, and usually they'll get, like, at least 10 seconds back. And he did that, like, early pit stop, and he was just 20 seconds back the whole time.
It was shocking. It was a really bad drive from him. I don't know whether the car was actually broken because Fernando was P11, I think.
Which, that's his best result of the season.
I love how we say that, and we're like, oh, yeah, and then you realise he crashed out twice.
Yeah.
So,
but I don't Stroll. But I don't think he was really running in a good spot in Australia when he crashed out. I think he crashed out from like 12th or 14th.
Yeah, I agree.
Somewhere in there.
It wasn't great. And then I'm going to put a new entry on this list. And I'm putting Lando on this list. Because if Max might be available, because the car's a bit crap over at the Red Bull, who wouldn't sign Max Verstappen? And if you're going to sign Max, you can't put Max and Lando in the same team. You have to get rid of one of them. So keep Oscar.
It's got to be. I think if Max bails on Red Bull, it's going to be for Mercedes.
Really?
I think George is gone and Max is in.
Why would I do have a point that's related to this, but why would you think he would choose Mercedes over McLaren? Because the quote from Max is, he said, if I had been in the McLaren, you wouldn't have seen me, because he'd have just screwed off down the road.
Yeah, because I don't think, with all the stuff Zach Brown has said about Max Verstappen, I don't think Zach Brown tries to hire Max Verstappen.
I see. But Toto, who has said odd things about Max in the past, but has tried to repair that. I can see this. I mean,
yeah, but Toto's usually been at least somewhat complimentary of Max. It's he wasn't venting about Max about Abu Dhabi 2021. For nowhere in all that did he blame Max for anything, because Max wasn't to blame for any of that. Max just took the advantage of the situation. Toto said good things, and Zach Brown has made comments like the Lewis Hamilton era is over and the Lando Norris era is here, which is like, let's just not even talk about what Max has done over the last couple years. And I think this is actually somewhat of a good segment or segue into qualifying recap, because Max put it on pole without a single purple sector.
He did such a good job. It
Yeah.
was great. Lewis has done that occasionally in the past. He's got pole with no purple sectors. So
yeah, but just anytime it's done, it's an impressive feat.
It's an impressive feat, doubly so when the other car that should be on pole should be so much better. But both McLaren drivers screwed up and messed that up.
Yeah.
Yuki outqualified Liam.
Well, was there anything else you wanted to say on Lando and the hot seat?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Well, if we're gonna say that Max is leaving Red Bull by the summer break. Mm-hmm. Also, if Max decides to take any sort of paternity leave, then that could sink Red Bull down below third in the constructors' standings.
Oh, they're going to be on the blower to the greatest medical minds, hoping that. Oh man, I've forgotten his girlfriend's name. What's her name?
Kelly.
They're going to be making sure, going to say, Kelly, you got to keep that baby until after the summer break because we can't have Max taking any time off.
I think she's due in June, bud.
Yeah, but I'm
maybe
sure
May.
Maybe the medical minds can solve this. The real question is if he does take that time off, who's going to get in that seat? Are they going to bump up someone? We're going to get Franco from Alpine. Are we going to pick the actual reserve driver, who I can't remember who their reserve driver is this week?
Daniel Ricciardo.
It's his one savior. I think Daniel's decided he doesn't want to do F1 anymore.
Yeah, but like what?
Not Sergio. Please don't make it Sergio.
No, but it was one of those things of when we were talking about like Ricciardo taking the fastest lap point in Singapore or something like that, so Lando wouldn't have it. As like, a great like payback gift for Max would be like, hey, go drive the Red Bull for me while I take a weekend off.
Like when Jensen came back to drive the McLaren while Fernando was trying to do the Indy.
And then what if he's good? What if he beats like Yuki or Liam or whoever's in that seat at that point in time? What if he just comes in for a one-off? What if he's in for Monaco and he just gets the one-off at Monaco and he beats everybody?
You're not going to like what I'm going to say. And I understand your hopium. I understand the aspiration for a beautiful fairy tale. But Daniel's done.
He is.
Even if he came back, I support.
Should we talk about Lewis Hamilton and other drivers that are done?
Yes. When we get,
but we should finish quality recap first.
We finish quality recap. Because speaking of drivers that were done, Yuki outqualified Liam, but didn't do great.
Hey, that is the first time Red Bull has made both cars into Q2 this season.
So we can call it a success. I will like to comment that Marco summarized this. I'll pull this up from the race recap. Marco was asked how Yuki did, and he said, "Fine." And I don't know whether that's damning praise or real praise.
Also, not good if one car wins, the other car gets 12th, and it's like, how do you do? Fine. Maybe they've actually admitted the car's terrible. Max was really like on a lot of media stuff once Liam was kicked out of like, hey, this car's really not great. Like,
yep.
And it seems like they haven't been listening to Max for a while about anything.
I don't understand that. I mean, to be fair, Mercedes did this with Lewis. I don't understand why you don't listen to your driver. And it's not just like it's your number one driver who's been racing for 6 months. It's like he's been doing it for a hot minute. He should be able to tell you what's wrong with it. And I understand as an engineer myself who works in software on occasion doesn't listen to his customers. I don't quite understand why you wouldn't hear a cacophony of complaining and say, "We hear you. We're trying to address it." That's different from whether you successfully address it or not. But like, empathizing, for want of a better word, and be like, okay, I understand, we're going to fix it. But yeah, if they've been ignoring him, they deserve to lose him.
Well, for some feedback I got, some advice I heard on a different podcast I was listening to, it's you take the note, not the advice.
Yes, exactly.
Hey, the front end's bad. You should make it better. And it's like, okay, well, the front end's bad. Let's see how we can make it better. You should make it better by doing X. Yeah. But yeah, take the note, not the advice. Yeah, but Isaac outqualified both Yuki and Liam. So
yeah, he did great. Got it. What was it? P7?
Which is also the whole thing of like, well, you're going to take Liam out of the seat with the track he's most familiar with. You're going to put Yuki in the seat. And then they both get outqualified by Isaac.
I think that just says that Isaac Hadjar is clearly the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, so should one of our predictions be that Isaac is in by Bahrain when Yuki inevitably starts to fail? Well, actually, Yuki had somewhat of an okay of Japan, so maybe Isaac in by the summer break, Monaco, something.
Is it Miami after Saudi?
I don't know. I don't have the schedule pulled up.
Bile and pain. It is in fact Miami. So Miami will be the opportunity because it'll be another break that's not back to back, unless Helmut Marko wants to get brutal, which he might. And that maybe is when Isaac will go back in the sunny Sunshine State.
Yeah, that checks out.
What else also happened in qualifying?
There was a fire.
Was there more than one fire, or was there only one fire?
The sheet says fire, not fires.
Okay. I think qualifying only had one fire. But there were many in free practice.
Yeah, it's still one of those, if I had a nickel for every time there was a fire, I'd have a lot of nickels, which is weird.
Yeah. So there was a fire, and then they put it out, and they all got going again, and it wasn't really a problem.
The scuttlebutt on Threads was that maybe for free practice, we should stop the clock.
Yes.
Because now in this world of you don't get testing or anything like that, you're actually really harming teams by having the clock continue to run during free practices. And like you had Jack Doohan's massive crash in FP2, which took so much time off the clock and everything else. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. If you're not going to allow testing, you should probably red flag free practice sessions. But I do know that throughout the weekend there are other things going on at the track. But this is the marquee event, so maybe.
This is the problem I think Formula One has, as it tries to make or more accurately, the circuits have, as they try to make themselves a more appealing destination for people to pay a hilarious amount of money. Is that it's not just the Formula One cars go around and go zoom zoom. Like I think they had a Ferrari Challenge Cup, and I think there was something else I heard that was going, but it wasn't F2 this weekend. But I feel like they should set this up so that there is more time to account for red flags. But maybe I can come back to my old hobby horse of I think they should go back to 90 minutes for free practice.
Like total?
No. Free 90 minutes per session, and then they can do what they want to do with the red flags.
What if you had Thursday just became practice day? And then, or Friday, but like I'm thinking because there are other formulas and stuff. What if Thursday was just practice day, and it was exact the same rules as preseason testing of like there was a morning session and there was an afternoon session. You can only put one car on the track at a time, and then the other driver is doing the media obligation stuff while the other driver is testing.
This is why we should be hired by Formula One and the FIA, because we know what's going on, because we have such a brilliant idea, and the drivers will love us. Actually, that's a piece of news we need to make sure we cover later, that the drivers and the GDPA will love us because we're going to make the media duties better and more awesome.
But then on top of that, you just rule out all of other free practices, so you go from that Thursday session right to like qualifying on a Saturday. Or if it's a sprint weekend, you do your sprint stuff. But like that's the only practicing you run, but you can do whatever you want in like these 2, 3, or 4 hour blocks.
This makes sense. I think we should go for this. I think we should make sure that this happens. FIA, please, you're listening. We know you listen to this podcast because it is the one that breaks the breaking news. Please make sure that you instigate this for the 2026 season.
Yes, the podcast that has absolutely no contacts anywhere is the one that breaks all the news. But that'd be great. Don't you think that'd be interesting to see?
Yes, I agree. Wholly support it. Speaking of the last part of quali,
or you just push media duties to Friday when everybody else is doing something. So you do practice, you do media, and then you do quali and race.
Yeah, that's like Monaco used to be before they fixed it last year.
Yep.
I can't believe we're taking good ideas from Monaco. Anyway, speaking of last bits of qualification, Sainz shockingly impeded Lewis, and he got a 3-place grid penalty, and I think it was deserved because it was really bad.
And didn't Lewis say on the radio it was Alex Albon?
He did. He was convinced it was Alex Albon, and I was like, oh, Lewis, we know you don't like Alex after those 3 times in 2019 when you slammed into him. Anyway, should we move on to the race? Because this is going to take us a long time to get through.
Oh, dear God. The cars went around a circuit.
This is one of the very few races in the history of Formula One that have been ruined by rain. If it hadn't been for the rain, we would have had a track that regularly set itself on fire. We've had some red flags, spicing it up.
What about Spa in 2021? That was really ruined by rain.
Yeah, see, very rare, but it does happen. Usually it's made better, but it was not this weekend.
I'm glad we didn't do a podcast for that one.
Yes, that would have been very difficult to try and squeeze out. Actually, no, we would have banged on for like 4.5 hours about how the FIA were the dumbest bunch of bag of rocks I've ever come across.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I will say I was on the East Coast for this race weekend, and I'm very happy I didn't try to stay up at all to watch it, because I would have been so upset because I was already like sleep deprived and everything else. I couldn't imagine like, all right, well, let me stay up and watch this race, and I stay up for that. Well, you know what? It would have put me to sleep anyway.
Except Andrew, that you would have been shocked awake in the early parts of the race, despite that you were addled, because the drama that Lando, who is so in tune with the fans, he dreamt up some drama and he made it happen for all of us.
That I am not the biggest Lando Norris fan, but
what was he doing?
What a fucking crybaby!
Like, he did that to himself in every possible way. So, and just to be clear, for those who did not watch, Max was in front of him coming out the pit lane, but Lando thought that he should have had a faster pit stop and should actually be in front of him, and so decided he'd drive on the grass and then whine that Max had pushed him off.
Well, Max actually had a really slow pit stop.
He did. He was 1 second slower than he should have been.
Apparently, the Red Bull pit crew has a set of twins on it that their dad is sick or something, so they were taking some time away. So it was the backups that were in, and that's why they had some slow stops. So that's sad. But yeah, either way, Max said, I don't know what Lando's point was there, because like Max was still clearly in front of him despite the slow pit stop. Like it wasn't that they were, he was in front and then pushed him off, which he didn't. It was Max clearly was off, or clearly was up ahead in front. Lando was clearly behind him. Max, and as they pointed out on the commentary, if Max would have gave Lando more space, he would have crossed the pit line and gotten a penalty, because you're not supposed to cross the pit exit line. So I don't know. Now,
isn't that the point? Isn't that Lando's point? Max made a choice, and he should have had to take the penalty just to make sure that Lando was okay.
Yeah, but also, like if you look at the track, the pit lane, the pit exit really does narrow rather quickly. And I think Lando was caught off by how quickly it did exit, and I think that's why he thought Max forced him off. But dude, Max didn't move. You were like, but you should have known Max didn't force you off because you were holding your wheels straight, and then suddenly you were mowing the lawn, as Max said in the post-race interview.
Indeed, and also Max was astute and noticed that probably Lando had turned his pit limiter off early, which, given that they didn't prosecute him with prejudice for this, makes me sad that they probably didn't think he did, because that would have been even funnier.
If he ended up getting the penalty?
Yeah, that would have been great. Like, you turned your pit limiter off early and broke the speed limit.
I did notice that Lando definitely started accelerating before Max did. Maybe Max was slow on the pit limiter, but it was definitely he did turn his pit limiter off before Max. It was very, very noticeable.
Yeah, and then he whined about it, and then they decided to do nothing, and it was great, and Max just screwed off down the road. But we should probably...
But there was also the fact of, like, the team was like, yeah, man, we're going to be on to the FIA about it, and, like, they didn't even tell him, no, he didn't push you off. The
team does need to stand up to its driver.
Yeah, a little bit. Because, man, it was... I think I made a meme of, like, the guy who put the bicycles or the stick in his own bicycle spokes, and I sent it to you of, it's like, how come Max did this to me? And it's
Max didn't do this to you, Lando. You did it to yourself.
But it really plays into the I think this whole race can be summed up as Max lives rent free in McLaren's head.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Because first off, I liked Gilles Villeneuve on the commentary. I thought it was a nice break from Martin Brundle.
I don't know if we can continue this podcast.
Oh, great. I'll free up a lot of my time. I thought he was fine, like commentary wise, like thoughts about Jack Villeneuve notwithstanding, like I thought it was fine. He had some, but he was making some points along the lines of like, they pitted one lap after each other. They didn't try to like alternate strategy. They didn't try to fresh tire it. Like he's like, you go from at least a 0% chance of winning to maybe like 50-50 or try to like cover him off. But it was like, Oscar pitted, Max covered Oscar, Lando pitted the exact same lap, and like we know that McLaren does not work well in dirty air. It works better in free air. So why would you not say do the opposite of Max? Stay out a lap or two longer, because we knew the undercut wasn't working or it wasn't powerful. So at that point, if you know that the undercut's really not doing anything, like stay out a lap or two later and like just try to get a little bit of pace in the car while your car that only works well in free air is in free air. Like it was 2-on-1 and it felt like they were just following him around the whole race and they weren't actually trying to do anything to put pressure on the Red Bull. When the fact that we know the Red Bull's an absolute tire monster, and at one point in time GP's like still like 30 laps or like 20 laps from the end is like, yeah, we're free for you to push for the rest of the race. Like, cool, that car chews up its tires. There was no tire deg this weekend, it seemed like, so you're doing nothing to improve your position other than just following Max around.
It was a bit like when, Keanu Reeves playing Neo in The Matrix is standing there and he realizes he can see it all and he's got his one hand and he's just gently fighting off all the Agent Smiths at the same time. It was a little bit like that. Clearly Max was trying because he had to work hard, but he also wasn't really trying because everybody else screwed up for him.
Yeah.
There was one other very exciting thing that really made the race because it was truly fantastic, because on lap 6, Lewis Hamilton overtook someone. And he was the only driver in the top 10 to overtake anybody in the entire 90 minutes of the race. Just proves
why he's the GOAT.
Exactly. The other fun stat is this is the first non-street Formula One race to have had the top 6 unchanged. And again, thanks to Lewis, it would have been the top 10 unchanged. So, good job, Lewis.
Which just proves why this race was not good.
Yeah, it wasn't good. Nobody got disqualified.
Ferrari will be very happy.
Yeah, did you hear that apparently they really did have to lift both cars were raised so that they would not have the plank issue?
But Lewis still had the plank issue. Yeah, that was some new details that came out of China, was that after the sprint race, they saw how much the wear was on Lewis's plank and realized they were going to need to raise the right head of the cars so that they can make it through qualifying in the race distance. And they still got DQ'd.
And then they had to raise it even more this week, so it's great.
Why don't they just make a stronger plank?
Titanium. That's what caused all the fires, was the titanium. Why don't they just raise it up and make it like an SUV and just call it good?
Formula SUV.
Exactly. The last bit of news here. George has made a formal complaint as the leader of the GDPA, or whatever the hell it is, GPDA, drivers cool gang of people who drive cars, saying that the toilet sucked and also they really demanded a shower. And he really thinks it needs to be fixed at all tracks so that they have somewhere that they can, and I believe this is what Ted said on the notebook, so that they can use the facilities without being bothered by fans.
Well, he'll just be back when we're on the European circuit and they get their motorhomes everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Can I go for a pee? Do you have 20 minutes to leg it back to the car? Okay. Driver of the day / driver who couldn't wait for it to be over, unless you have an additional commentary about the race, but nothing really happened, so shall we?
I'm really mad at ESPN.
Oh, okay.
Because I have the ESPN app, which is where somehow I watch the races from, because sometimes it's a little easier to find the race than other situations and other places I can watch it. But they do this really terrible thing where, like, they know I watch Formula One. They know I like Formula One. So I open the app, and on the home screen is like, oh, here are the results from the Japanese Grand Prix. And it's like, I was going to watch that.
That is terrible.
Right.
That is. It's one thing when they do it 24 hours later and it starts showing up. Like, I kind of accept that. But when you're doing it within, like, 12 hours, really, people? So driver who couldn't wait for it to be over was ESPN, because they do not want to feel Andrew's ire and anger.
Well, you want the clicks from the results. Who cares about people trying to watch a replay?
Exactly. All you care about is that they stay subscribed. My driver of the day was Lewis, because the only one in the top 10 to get an overtake done.
Fair enough.
Driver who couldn't wait for it to be over was Oscar, because he kept being held back by Lando.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I really had no idea who the driver of the day or who nobody did anything, so I couldn't really say, like, well, this person wanted their day to be over, this person was clearly the driver of the day. I put Kimi Antonelli as my driver of the day. I really don't have a good reason why.
Because he's the youngest driver to have led a Grand Prix, and he's the youngest driver to ever have a fastest lap.
Yeah, but he seems to be settling into that car just fine, and looks like Toto might have been right about him, and George probably has some reasons to be concerned after the summer break.
Indeed, very concerning. Do you remember who the official driver of the day was?
No.
It was Yuki with 13% or 14% of the vote.
So there was something. So Kimi was the driver of the day in China.
Yes.
And there was something that I think I heard of, like they put weights on the driver, like they've pre-weighted the drivers, I think, or something like that. Because Kimi was surprised he was driver of the day, and there was some scuttlebutt that like there might be some internal weighting of like a vote for one driver counts more than like a vote for another driver because like I guess of where they're placing or something. But there's something of like because Kimi was surprised he got driver of the day, he was like, why? And it was like something where he got enough votes that given how his driver of the day vote was weighted, it's actually what got him driver of the day.
This is terrible. What is Formula One doing? What are they going to do? Oh, we like you, so you get more points in the race if you come fifth, but we like you, so we're going to make it worth 50 points.
Well, it could be a thing from, remember, when they first introduced it, it was like always Max Verstappen, because Holland just voted.
Yeah.
And so maybe this was a reaction to that to try to make it less crazy.
I see. So the Italians couldn't even vote him in, and they needed some help.
Yeah.
Championship what?
The Italians aren't going to vote for a German team when you have Ferrari right there.
That is a good point. If that's going to be the greatest question for them. When Kimi is in a Mercedes and he's about to win the World Drivers' Championship, will the Italians still vote for the Ferraris? Probably. Championship watch. Lando still leads by one tiny point. Thanks, Max. Red Bull is third, 26 points above Ferrari. Love it.
Yeah.
Classic.
I figure that's the one we need to watch right now is where is Red Bull in the constructor standings.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Come on, Yuki, you can save this. Spice takes and rumors?
Yeah, I'm actually no, you have the rumors. I was thinking Bahrain predictions.
Spicy picture. So I have concluded that tracks are going to get blamed for boring races because they're going to say, yeah, Japan track's just a Formula One track, boy, it's boring, blah, 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 this sucks lame. But actually it's all about the regulations. The tracks will also end up getting dropped because street tracks have more money. They'll be like, we got rid of the track because it's a bit lame, so we went for the street track, like, what is it, the Madrid Ring or the Mad Ring? Mad Ring, I think it's called.
Invented by Jeremy Clarkson in Top Gear.
Interesting.
Go back to watch like the Spain special with, and they put a street track around, was it Madrid or a suburb of Madrid?
Interesting.
Yes.
I remember that now.
Yeah.
So, but the reason this has all happened is because the regulations are terrible. It's because Ross Brawn retired and everybody forgot how to run the AWS script that tells you this aerodynamics will cause to poop out a bunch of dirty air that will screw everybody else up. So they have no choice but to accept them now. Because apparently he was green lighting / red lighting all the ones before. And then this means that because of all the problems with the ground effects going away, it's going to be great. Lewis will back to be God status. He will be fighting with Max, because Max is great, in 2026. And then this will all be fine and we'll be back to normal, and he'll be back in his natural habitat. So it's all great.
I would love if somehow in all this crazy conspiracy stuff, Red Bull is bad in the constructors' standings. Max bails to Mercedes. Ferrari decides that Lewis wasn't worth their time. Lewis goes to Red Bull, and then we have Max versus Lewis again in a Mercedes and a Red Bull, just flipped.
I love the sound of that.
It's not going to happen, but wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah. Lewis will look even worse in a Red Bull outfit than he did in Ferrari. But Ferrari changed the red for him, so he looks good in it now.
I think he does look really good in it. Yeah.
Predictions for Bahrain?
Sure. Let's do it.
So I know some people hate this term, but it's a better one. It is basically going to be like... Raw dogging a 24-hour non-stop flight between London and Sydney will be more interesting and more mentally stimulating than the race in Bahrain.
All right, sell this one to me, because Bahrain's usually produces very good races on the calendar. Is this like the Spain thing of because now we do testing there, they all know how to set up the cars and there won't actually be good racing?
Exactly, and we've just seen on Suzuka, which you normally can produce some pretty good racing, and historically speaking, didn't give us much.
True, at least, but Suzuka really doesn't have a heavy braking zone, and Bahrain has 2 at least.
Yeah, but I still think we're gonna have a terrible race. Max is gonna win. Yuki will be in the top 10. And then lastly but not least, Lando will not make it into Q3 and blames it on someone impeding him.
Okay. I'll say that we'll get our fourth winner in 4 races. So we'll continue to not have repeat winners. If we want to really go crazy, it'll probably be a Ferrari winner because I don't want to say it's going to be Mercedes.
Lewis.
Could be Lewis.
Could be
Or
probably
Charles. Yeah. I'll say Ferrari gain on Red Bull for third in the constructors. And I'll say Liam is still the lowest place Red Bull driver. I'm including all 4 Red Bull drivers in there.
Okay. I think that could be true, and that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Has he raced at Bahrain before? I don't think he has. He's had the practice, so maybe he's okay.
All right, here's a question for you. If Nick DeBris and Liam Lawson need a third for their really embarrassing Formula One drivers WEC team for 24 Hour Le Mans, who's the next driver going in with them?
Lance Stroll.
No, it's a Red Bull drivers.
Oh. Mark Webber.
Would he do Le Mans again after his backflip?
Yeah, I think he would.
But he wasn't embarrassing. He won races.
True, that is a good point. If you want, then it's got to be Jamie Alguersuari or Brendan Hartley.
Brendan Hartley? Scott Speed, wasn't he a Red Bull driver?
He was for a bit, but actually wasn't Brendan Hartley pretty good in WEC?
He was pretty good in WEC.
Yeah, so maybe we shouldn't put him in the car. Nick DeBris, Liam Lawson. I'm trying to think of the other ones that we've had.
Well, Daniel Ricciardo of recent. On his second stint through the Toro.
Yeah, but he was good, though. He has high points in his career.
Yeah.
David Coulthard.
Anyway, David Coulthard could be good. If you think you know who should be the third driver on the Red Bull or the disappointing Red Bull driver WEC team, please let us know at feedback@tinfoilhelmets.com so you can let us know your conspiracy feedback and wants. Boy, I butchered that one. Yeah, and don't forget to tell your friends to like, rate, listen, and subscribe. And I realized Dominic was supposed to do the outro, but that just seemed like too good of a segue not to.
Love it. Save me some time.
The most lethargic clapping ever.